Tonight we have 3 candidates or 2 open seats on the school board. You will notice, however, on your ballot that there is a 4th candidate. Brian Jones had filed, but has withdrawn from the race. The remaining candidates are Della Streaty-Wilhoit. Della, you want to wave to everybody in the room so they know who you are? Blake Willoughby and Jay Atkins. You didn't know you had to have your pageant wave, did you? Okay. The school board candidates will each have 2 minutes for an opening statement and will speak in ballot order. Our timers will provide, the lady sitting right in front of you there, our timers will provide a 30-second warning. When the red sign is held up, your time is up. After the opening statement, we will have audience and moderator questions. I have been given questions by the League of Women Voters as a starting point, but I know based on the crowd in this room that I'm going to get a lot of questions. In fact, you'll probably see me up here sorting cards, trying to figure out which ones I can fit in. So we'll do our best to get as many questions answered as possible. Audience members can use the white index cards. I think they're all around the room, and write your question, and League members will bring them to me. After questions from the audience and the moderator, candidates will present a 1-minute closing statement. If you are in the middle of a sentence, I think the ladies have gone over this with you, please finish your sentence. Don't make it a run-on. You're on the school board. You get counted off for that. We are judging you for your grammar. So finish your thoughts and then be polite to let the next person speak. So I'm going to, without further ado, begin. Della Streaty-Wilhoit, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Della Streaty-Wilhoit, and I want to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm running for the school board. I'm running for the school board because I want to communicate with others. I want to build trust, and I'm particularly interested in encouraging students in the sciences, technologies, mathematics, and as well as the engineering area. People ask me, well, did you have an agenda? And my answer is no. I don't have an agenda on why I wanted to be a part of the school board. I just want to advance my voice and let them know what I'm all about. Let me share with you a little bit of my educational background. I have my PhD in the sociology area. I have worked for the United States Department of Interior, National Park Service, as well as the Forest Service. I have a daughter and a son. My daughter graduated from Rockbridge about 4 years ago, starting at New Haven to Rockbridge. I'm married, as I said, 2 kids and three grandchildren. One of the things that I really think is very, very important is to let you know that I want to listen to you. I want to hear what you have to say, and if you have some issues, whether it's equity issues, whether it's transportation issues, achievement gaps, I am here to listen. And so therefore, I want to tell you, yes, my name is the first one on the ballot. As you can see, is for Della Streaty-Wilhoit, but please vote for me April the 2nd, and you will see Della. I thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Willoughby, you may present your opening statement.
Hi, I'm Blake Willoughby. Thank you all for coming out this afternoon and attending this forum and listening to why we're running for school board. Why I'm running for school board is because I want to bring a fresh, community-engaged, artist-educator perspective. And why I want to do that is because I am the youngest candidate in here that is and also the closest in age to our kids. And so I'm understanding how they are navigating becoming life ready for when they graduate from high school. And in that understanding, I also understand the highest importance of having a quality education to prepare them for that. And in that quality education, I also feel as an artist, I think it's important to integrate the arts into STEM. And the reason why I say that is because by doing that, we can aid our kids in creatively and uniquely solving the problems of the future as they graduate and go into our community and do the work that they want to do. The other thing that I really want to bring is a lot of my work has been in facilitating dialogues within communities around diversity and inclusivity issues, and that model of facilitating dialogues is really about being community engaged, being constantly present, and making yourself available to the community, to your parents, and to your teachers, and to your kids. And so why I want to see that happen is because I want to make sure that we are all heard and you are heard, because I want to see a board that is coming to you on your turf and not asking you just to come to our turf. because board meetings are not always the most accessible. They happen at 6:30 when parents are either coming home from work, cooking dinner, or helping their kids with homework, and they also happen at like 7:15 in the morning when people are going to work. So I think it's really important for a board to come to you and listen to you, and I look forward to sharing a little bit more about my candidacy. So please think about voting for Blake Willoughby on April 2nd.
Thank you, Blake. Jay Atkins.
Thank you very much. Can I do this? I'm a little too tall for the microphone stand.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I do want to thank KFRU, the League of Women Voters, and the library for having us here. It's a great opportunity to meet with citizens and voters, and I appreciate everybody coming out. By way of background, I grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado, great town, very similar to Columbia in a lot of ways, only with bigger mountains. After 4 years in the service, I got an academic scholarship to Missouri State University. While I was there, I met a lovely young lady named Haley, and 20 years and 4 kids later, here we are. We moved to Columbia about 15 years ago so I could attend University of Missouri Law School, and then we just settled here in the community. Following law school, I was a assistant attorney general, a prosecutor for the state for a few years, and since that time, I've made my career as a professional government affairs attorney, working primarily in Jefferson City and all over the country. The most common question I get since I filed for office is, why in the world are you doing this? I think we covered already that the pay, it's not for the pay. And it's simple. I gave you 4 reasons already. We have 4 kids in the district. My wife and I have spent a whole lot of time in and around Columbia Public Schools, and it's very important to us that every kid in the district gets the opportunity to have the same tremendous education that we see our kids having. In addition to that, I do have five areas of focus that I will bring to the board should I be elected. Number 1 is I want to make the goal of this district 100% reading proficiency at the 3rd grade level for all students across the board. We'll talk more about that later. Secondly, I want to make sure that we are expanding and improving our gifted education offering. That's very important for an at-risk group of kids that is oftentimes overlooked. Finally, we will focus on, thirdly, focus on maintaining local control. Thirdly, I want to take a look at how we are deploying technology and infrastructure improvements in our district. And then finally, I will work on improving communication between the parents and board. Thank you.
Candidates will each have 60 seconds to answer the questions, and we will alternate who gets the questions first. So fortunately for me, the league helps me out and makes sure I stay in order, so they give me a list of who goes first. And so we're going to go in the exact same order for the first question as we just did for the opening statements. So the first question is going to come from the league, so I'm going to use it. It's a slow way to start this thing. Redistricting of the schools is a hot topic in Columbia. What method do you propose for fair redistricting? And I guess as a follow-up to that, as part of your answer, do you think that the process used was fair and ended in a great result? Della.
Yes, I will be pleased to answer that. But before I answer it, please allow me to acknowledge that the CMNEA endorsed me, and I was very pleased for them to do so. So I wanted to thank them openly. Now, to address the redistricting, many people are going to say that it was not fair how the rezoning and the redistricting was done. I think that it was done fairly, and I believe that the communication was opened. They tried for many months to let people know about the opening and the open house. And it's not going to help everyone. I recognize that the achievement gap and the socioeconomic status may change a bit, and parents are not happy. But I believe that the school did the very best that they could, and they are still talking on it. But option 2 was the very best choice, and the majority of the people, based on the survey, did say option 2 was best.
Thank you. Blake Willoughby.
I do think that the board made a good decision for not doing it themselves by getting consultants to help them with making these decisions and taking in the surveys and engaging with the community. I do think that there should have been more engagement with our community and making sure that we were getting answers and opinions from across our community and ensuring that it was a well-balanced information on what people were wanting to see and how they were wanting to see it be implemented. Now, in response to what has happened and the decision that has been made on the boundaries, I do think that it is highly imperative that when looking at the budget, which the two people who you vote for will be helping make that decision with the budget, is making sure that we are equitably distributing our resources and ensuring that where the most need is at is where the money is going, because that is where the most positive impact is going to be happening.
Thank you very much. Jay Atkins.
Thank you. So I'm going to answer this a little bit differently because I don't think we did a very good job. Now, I was not there for the process, and that process is done. And should I get elected to the board, I can't go back and undo it. But what I do know is that I haven't talked to a single parent yet who's pleased with the outcome of that process. So that says to me whether the parents need to get more engaged or it's the problems on the school district side, we need to relook at our methodology and figure out what we did wrong and fix it for the next time. So the reality is we hired an outside firm to come in and help tell us how to redistrict with the idea of stopping overcrowding and improving the distribution of socioeconomic, free and reduced lunch throughout the district, and we failed on both counts. So I have a really hard time endorsing that process or how the board went about it. So I know they're good folks and it's well-intentioned, but the process failed. So we need to, before we go through that process again, we need to do a pretty deep dive into what happened, unpack how we failed, make sure that we put a process in place so that we don't fail again.
Thank you very much. Next question, we will start with Blake. We'll get this one first. How do you feel Columbia Public Schools is doing in meeting the needs of its gifted children, and what, if anything, would you change about the programming?
Yeah, I think from the conversations that I've been having with parents across the district and teachers is that there is a want and a need for more funding in our public education, our gifted education, and ensuring that those kids are attaining the education that they are wanting, and it's also challenging them. I was a child where I went to school, we called this program Kindle, and I was a part of it, and I went into it. I missed half of science every week to go to it, and it was a great program because it helped me get different learning experiences and also challenge me to think differently. And that's kind of where I say that we need to have arts into STEM, because we will allow our kids to know how to creatively and uniquely learn different things. And that is where gifted education programming is as well. And it is important to throw some more funding in that way and ensuring that we have a quality curriculum in that area.
Jay Atkins?
Yes, so gifted education is a particularly important issue to me, and I think that our district overall does an okay job. I'd give us probably a B. I know Beth Winton and her group at district are working incredibly hard, and they're doing great things, but the problem parents of gifted students face is that there is a serious lack of education about what it means to have a gifted kid. This is an at-risk group that we don't think of as an at-risk group, okay? And if we don't work hard to meet their needs and make sure they have the resources available, then what we see statistically over time is that this group has one of the highest dropout rates, one of the highest rates of substance abuse, and one of the highest rates of suicide of any cohort that we study. So this is a big deal. We do a really good job in this district at the elementary school level. I think there's room for improvement in how we're identifying gifted kids to make sure that we're catching everybody that needs intervention. And then I think the majority of my focus will be on improving our gifted education programming and support for those kids at the junior high and high school level.
Thank you very much. Della, Streaty-Wilhoit.
Yes, one of the things what I wanted to talk about on the gifted kids is this. I think it's very, very important that the gifted children have a curriculum to fit their needs. Most of the kids are somewhat bored in this school because they are gifted. So we have to do an accessibility of where they are gifted, and then we have to put not only the source funding, but also the teachers there. And so for that, I think that, as I have said, that I am pushing that STEM program. I think that that is most challenging, and I think it will particularly help the gifted children. But you also have got to have the teachers that can work directly with those kids and let them know that they are just as important, because our gifted kids can become, I think the word I'm trying to say, they can become socially non-responsive if they do not have what they need. And so we are here to help all of our children, and today, and particularly the gifted kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And following on from that, I think this is a good follow-up, and we will start this one with Jay Atkins. Do you think children who are low income have greater needs than those exceptional children? And sorry, let's say 2 questions. So that's the end of the question. Do you think children who are low income have greater needs than exceptional children?
Well, you know, that's an interesting question, and what I'm really not interested in doing is have a race to see which group needs the most intervention, right? I don't know that that's a healthy conversation. The reality is that our district, just like you know, our world, is made up of groups of different types of people and different types of kids, and within those groups, there's always going to be segments or pockets of kids that have special needs and of some sort, be it socioeconomic in nature, be it academic in nature, whatever the case may be. So it is incumbent upon this district to make sure that we are allocating our resources in a way that does two things. One, does the most good for the most number of kids, okay? Like if we look at the bell curve, we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the majority of the kids in a way that's giving them a good, positive education that makes them life ready. But then within that, we have to look at the resources that we have available to meet the needs of those other kids that are in the outliers, that have socioeconomic needs, that have academic needs, that have special education needs, whatever it may be, and we have to do that responsibly. So I'm not prepared to make a judgment on which group needs more attention than the other. The reality is we have an obligation to all of our kids.
Della, Streaty-Wilhoit.
Yes, children with low income, yes, they do have needs. The gifted children, yes, they do have needs. Therefore, they have equal needs, but it's just different challenges. And so therefore, you cannot compare a low income with, to some degree, the gifted child because their needs are different. For example, the achievement gap is clearly an achievement gap between women and minority, but particularly our poor minority kids, as well as the socioeconomic status. Now, don't get me wrong, you can be poor and you can be gifted. So don't misunderstand me on that, but there's clearly a difference. But the bottom line is all of our children is our future. And so we have to recognize those needs, and by recognizing those needs, then you can help every child, because helping one child is successful in helping all. Thank you.
Willoughby.
No, yeah, I don't want to be making a judgment call on what children need to be getting more resources than the other. There, as Della was saying, there are going to be areas for one child that the need and what they're needing to receive in resources is going to be different than another child. And that's not a bad or good thing, it just means that it's different resources that they are needing to make sure that they are life ready and they are successful in their education. And so I think that is where the importance is for the district to really be investigating what those areas are for each kid, and ensuring that we are meeting those needs and making sure that our kids are all in a space where they're feeling welcome, where they're feeling included, and where they're safe. Because that is the most important. Because when we have children that are feeling that way and their needs are being met on a basic level, they're going to be in a more positive space to be able to learn, and they will be more focused and ready to learn and be excited, because they always are excited. But when there are areas in their life, whether it's trauma or not getting enough sleep or not eating a little bit enough for breakfast, they're going to be a little not totally focused when it comes to being in the classroom, so that's really important.
Thank you very much. Question 4, we're back to starting with Della, Streaty-Wilhoit. Do you think it is appropriate to have schools focus on one thing like arts or STEM, and how can we make sure all kids throughout the district get equal learning opportunities?
When you're educating your children, we must focus on the arts as well as STEM. That is why people are saying STEM anymore, S-T-E-A-M. And so, but we also recognize that history tells us that most of the kids are pretty even balanced in the arts, and we are not even balanced into the STEM program. Therefore, I do know that we complement each other, if you will, on the fact that I push the sciences. And I push that because women and minorities don't have that. The arts are the ones that we normally end up going to. Everything is very important, so the curriculum must be balanced, and it must be balanced that we don't forget any of the STEM or the arts. So let's get the curriculum whereby all of our children, whether they want the arts or the STEM, they have a choice.
Thank you very much. Willoughby.
I don't think it's a necessary problem that we have schools that are specialized in specific areas. I do agree with Della that we do need to have a balanced curriculum across the district that is including all the different ways of learning and different styles and interests that our kids have. there are times as well where schools that focus in on STEM or on arts is going to be a more accessible way for a child that leans in those. Ooh, so sorry, drop some water for those on listen on the radio. And so what where was I thought? What I was meaning is just that sometimes a specialized school in those areas is going to allow a kid who is more STEM leaning, they're going to be able to learn history in a more interesting way because their interest is in STEM and we can approach it in that way. For our art-focused kids that have an interest in that area, teaching history in an art-focused kind of way is going to help them have better accessibility to it. So that's where the importance of having some schools in those ways, but I do think on a larger district level that we should all the time have a balanced curriculum in all of our areas to make sure that every child is getting the same quality public education that is possible here in our district.
Tom, you'll be glad to know the microphone suffered no ill effects from the water. Okay, because he's always getting on us at the studio about that. Jay Atkins?
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that, though. You know, I grew up in the 80s watching Fame, and so I'd love if we could open that, dance school here in the district as well. But seriously, in all seriousness, I like the idea of having some flexibility in education built into our district. And I think having some specialized schools is a great way to do that. I think my family personally has benefited from the magnet school program that started here in the 70s and was a trend back then, and a lot of communities didn't do it very well, but we here in Columbia did it very well and have 3 great magnet schools at the elementary school level that I think are fantastic. They give a great opportunity for kids that need a slightly different environment. I think the same thing is true when we're talking about a STEAM school at the middle school level. I would be in favor of exploring more of those options. I agree with Blake. We need to make sure that, and Della, that we have a core curriculum that meets the needs of all the students, but I really like the idea of having some flexibility in our educational system to meet needs that are maybe a little off the beaten path.
I'm going to follow on from that with this question. Given that research shows that exposure to and participation in the arts is a powerful, basically I think it's good for academic and social achievement. Do you think the Columbia Public Schools provide adequate support for the arts program? You are up, Blake. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read.
We're going to start with the artist. From the conversations that I've been having with a lot of our principals and a lot of our teachers, I'm seeing some way better facilities for the arts than what I had as a kid. And so that amazes me. Now, that's something, that does not mean that everything is where everyone would like it to be. And so, for me, where I think that resources could go into is that it's great to have electives and courses that our kids could take, but the importance of the arts and a well-rounded education is highly imperative, as we're seeing in the research. And as an artist, I love that research, because it's pointing out that we need to have curriculum and education taught that also hits in some art ways. And so interesting ways of how to do that is very simple. Like for a science class, do we talk about chemical reactions with art? Paint, colors. How do we make the different colors and how is the paint reacting? And we can talk about that in science classes. We can talk about that in an art class that is integrating these areas of STEAM.
Thank you very much. Jay Atkins?
Yeah, thank you. And it's a great question because my family, the intersection of arts and academics literally pulled my family out of destitute poverty back in the 1940s. So my last name is Atkins. That's not the Atkins company that's here in town. That's not my family. My family, my grandfather's brother was a guitar player named Chet Atkins that maybe some of you in this room have heard of. So literally music and the arts enabled my family to rise out of abject poverty and then go on to live in a world where I became the first kid in my family to go, not let alone law school, but to go on to college and get a college education. And that was possible by the arts. And my father was a tremendous guitarist in his own right. He was also a self-taught electrical engineer because he understood that math and music are one and the same. And he used that to his advantage in life. So this is very personal to me. So I want to see an expansion of the arts. I want to make sure that we're using the arts to teach academics. I mean, when it all comes down to it, the world is numbers, really. So and that stuff interplays in a way that I think is important to teach our kids.
Della, Streaty-Wilhoit.
Yes, arts are very powerful, but I need to tell you, growing up, we did not have arts. And by that, we had reading, writing, and arithmetic. And every now and then, you pick up a little bit of music. You'll see on television, if you had one, a little bit of arts. And so today, we have done tremendously well than what you and I had. If you're over 50 or 55, all you probably remember is reading, writing, and arithmetic. But saying that, I want to say this. Arts is already integrated in the STEM program, the technology of it. If you look at the things that we can do with the technology, you already have the arts. It's a complement to the STEM program. I think that the Columbia School Board is doing more and more, but not just the school board, the city as well. The city is bringing in arts, and art is free. It's a freedom of mind.
Thank you very much. Question 6, we're going to start on the end with Jay Atkins, and unfortunately we're going to leave the subject of the arts. Do you favor looking into use of public transportation for students?
Yeah, that's a great question, because this has come up a lot as we've done these. And again, just like the question of specialized schools, yes, I love ideas that are outside of the norm, that are outside the box, or where we can use creative ways to solve existing problems. And in a city like Columbia, would one of those options for fixing our our kind of one-size-fits-all single contract provider busing system, would one solution to that be partnering with the city? Yeah, I think it might be. But what does that mean? Right? It means that we're dealing with kids, school-age kids, some very young, so we have to be cognizant of that. We have to approach it, in a sensible way, and make sure that we're putting student safety first, and that we're doing it in a way that actually is bringing benefit not only to the school, but to the school district and the city, but also to the kids. So I'm very open to that idea. I think we need to be careful in proceeding with it, and if that becomes an option, if that enabling legislation passes in the General Assembly, then I'd like to look at it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Della, Streaty-Wilhoit.
Yes, I do favor public transportation to a point. But let me pause to tell you that even though I think that public transportation could be good, I've been waiting about 60 years to say that we need seat belts. We need seat belts in public transportation. And so saying that, I work on the committees and we talk about it. I recognize that the students, some of the kids cannot get to school. The attendance are very low. And that's just one facet of it. So any way that we can get our kids to school safely, I am open for discussion. There are many groups right now that we're talking about it, and I favor it. I favor anything that will help our kids. But for me, I've been waiting for that. Put my kids in seat belts. We're not doing that. Now, so you think about that, and when you want the public transportation, let's look at seat belts, because we wear them.
That's right. Thank you very much. Blake Willoughby.
I really like this question. I'm out of the three of us, I'm the only one that has served on our city's Public Transit Advisory Commission. And so I have some firsthand experience on this conversation, because I just finished up my term on that commission. And so I think it is really important to get the state statute that is barring us from having that conversation with the city and the district, so that we can have that conversation. We need to get that statute gone so that we can at least begin the conversation. Where I land on actually having that is, I do think it would be a positive, but I do think that we have to really engage with our community and talk about those safety concerns that Jay and Della were talking about. We need to talk about seatbelts. We need to talk about our bus drivers well-trained to be handling our kids and all the variety of our kids and what they might be dealing with on those days. Where I think would be a really great place to start if the city and our community and the district moved into a space of using public transit is to start with our high schoolers. We already, with the public transit, allow kids to ride for free from 18 below, so it would be naturally there for us to use.
Thank you very much. I don't want to lose my place here. This one I'm going to take, I've been doing audience questions. I'm going to pull this one from the League of Women Voters, because I think given where we are and what we're up to, this is an appropriate question. And we'll be starting with this one with Della, Streaty-Wilhoit. Should civic education be a requirement for middle school and high school students? How can we engage young people so that they will become voters?
I need you to repeat the
Sure.
very first
I
part.
will do that. Should civic education be a requirement? I think we called that, civics or social studies
Yeah.
back in the day. Should civic education be a requirement for middle school and high school students? How can we engage young people so that they will grow up and vote?
Well, we certainly should have our young people to vote, but I'll tell you this, if the parents do not vote, probably the children are not going to. And so we have to really start with the parents and educate the parents on why it's so important to vote. And from the time that a young child grows up, they should recognize that in America it's very important to vote, that we must vote with our feet and with our hands, and the only way to do that is to educate our children that their votes count. So therefore, it should be started very early in age, just to tell them how important it is for American people to vote, because votes can change the administration of our wonderful country.
Thank you very much. Blake Willoughby.
Yes, I do think that we need to be talking about civics and teaching it to our kids. I am a part of an organization that's been working very slowly to go into the different high schools here in Boone County and register those that are able to register at 17 who would be turning 18 during an election cycle. And so I do think it's important to get them to be registered voters, but I think how we have that conversation is about good civics curriculum. But I also think for me, what got me really hooked into it was constitutional law class that I took. And so I do think that having a conversation with our teachers, our students, and our community to see if we could all get on board on making a requirement of constitutional law to be taught to our kids at the high school level so that they understand our Constitution and they understand what their rights are and what it means to be deeply civically engaged, because having that knowledge is how you become engaged and become an informed voter.
Thank you, Blake. Jay Atkins.
Yeah, I agree with this. I think it's tremendously important, and I say that as a guy that's made a career working in civics and in and around government. And I've seen the results of our high school students' ability, or rather inability, to pass the basic citizenship test that most people would have to pass before they become American citizens. And it's bad. In fact, it's so bad that the state last year passed a law that required the University of Missouri, no student can graduate from the University of Missouri until they can pass a basic civics test. So I actually had lunch with a constitutional law professor just this week who was lamenting that they're not sure how they're going to get their college students up to speed. So it's dismal, and that's a tragedy, because if you don't know who we are and where we come from, then you're bound to screw it up when it's your turn to run things. So we need to make sure that these kids, I think civics is incredibly important. And just as an example, I will take this opportunity to say that this is a midterm municipal election. Our turnout in this county is typically about 8% in an election like this. So that's a poor commentary.
Thank you very much. We're trying to fix that part right about now. Question 8, it's a very long question, but I'm just going to summarize what I hope that the person is asking here. They were a teacher for 31 years and had some trouble with administrators who some were very fair and open and some were the teacher's worst problem. How do you presently make sure all administrators are held accountable? And I think, Blake, you're up first.
All right, so I've heard this phrase before, and from talking to school board members that are currently sitting there, we hire one employee, and that is the superintendent. As a school board, that is who we hire. And so what that means is that we need to work with our superintendent, our assistant superintendents, and those in the administration to ensure that our principals, our APs, and all other administrators are being open and fair and making sure that they are listening to our teachers. I do think that there's been a distrust that has happened with our teachers on the ground in the classroom with administrators, and so how we can actually kind of flip that on its head is that what I would like to see as a community engaged approach is having school board members, and I am committed to doing this, being present during lunch hour at our schools so that teachers can come in very casual ways, say what's going on in their classroom, because then we as board members can hear what's going on, can hear about the new curriculum, if there is new curriculum and how it's working, and we can talk to our administrators and say, here are ways that we've been hearing from our teachers, what are things that we could fix, what are areas that we can strengthen that they're saying is really working.
Thank you very much. Jay Atkins.
Yeah. Excuse me, thank you. So it starts, first of all, with your philosophical approach to what a board is meant to do and what the proper role of a board in a district is. So I will share my perspective on that with you. You heard me say in my opening that one of my primary points of focus is maintaining local control, and I mean that in two ways. What are those two ways? One, I think that we need to do a better job engaging in Jefferson City. That's not the topic of this question, but number two is we need to improve the teachers' control in their own classroom. The biggest complaint I hear from all my friends that are teachers is this kind of overwhelming sense that they are being micromanaged in their own classroom. And I think that's a lousy approach, and I think it gets lousy results. I don't think you can run a school district that way. I don't think you can run a district that way. I don't think you can micromanage a classroom from the executive boardroom at district headquarters and expect to get a positive result. We need to set clear expectations for our teachers. We need to make sure that they have all the tools and resources they need to meet those expectations, and then we need to get out of the way and trust them to do their job and give them the freedom and the ability to do that job. If we then have to go back and maybe correct something here and there, we can do it. But as a management approach, I think it starts with getting out of the teacher's way.
Thank you very much. Della, Streaty-Wilhoit.
Yes, I do believe that the administrator should be held accountable. But the way that can happen is this: you must speak up. My priority is that we must communicate. It is a difference between communicating and talking. And so when you communicate and let us know what's going on, then you are building trust. But what is happening is this: not enough people is speaking up because they do not want to become professionally assassinated. And so saying that, then we must speak up, we must build trust, and we as a school board member must ensure that that person or people that are speaking up and say this person should go or should not go, then they are not held accountable for someone else's bad behavior. And that is why we are here, to listen to the teachers, to others, and to find out what we can do. There have been too many times that I know that people want to speak up and they are speaking the truth and they have retaliation against them. Fear is very powerful.
Thank you very much. Next question, starting with Jay Atkins. Can you please talk about how you think Columbia Public Schools should ensure that LGBTQ youth are welcome and supported?
Yeah, that's a good question. And if anybody's spent any time on my Facebook page, they know that, excuse me, that has been a topic of some unfortunate banter on there that I wish I could take down. But since the courts are undecided on whether or not my campaign page is a public space, I am forced to leave it up there for all the world to see. That said, let me be very clear. I think that the #1 priority of our schools, in addition to educating our kids, is to making sure that our kids have a safe environment in which they can come and learn and grow and develop and learn to think and know stuff. Okay, there is no room in our schools for bullying, for intimidation, for picking on kids or making them feel uncomfortable, whether that's from student to student or teacher to student. That said, on the issue, on this particular issue, the human sexuality and questions about human sexuality have been controversial in our schools since we've had schools. That is why we have a state statute that addresses it. That's why we have a written district policy that addresses it. And I think it's high time to have the conversation about how we include LGBTQ issues into our sexual education curriculum. But I do think that those conversations are best suited for taking place within that legal and policy framework.
Thank you very much. Della, Streaty-Wilhoit.
Yes, if you have been following us in the newspaper on our Facebook, you know that I believe it when I say injustice to one is injustice to every one of us. And I have stated that because it's very, very important. I have a zero tolerance for anyone that feel that the LGBTQ should have a different type of treatment. If you do that to the LGBTQ, you would do that to me. You would do that to others. So only thing I can tell you is that we must, as board members, make sure that we do not stand for that whatsoever. And for me, whether I was on the school board or not, it is not at all tolerable. We cannot have it. We are different, but we should embrace the differences and understand it, and we should educate each other about our sexuality because we do have unconscious biases.
Thank you very much. Blake Willoughby.
So some might disagree with me on this, the top priority of a school district is to make sure that every child feels welcomed, is safe, and feels included in their environment. That's hands down the priority of any school district. Then it becomes education. And the reason why I say that is because if a child does not feel safe in the environment that they are supposed to be learning in, they are worried about a bunch of other things and they are not paying attention to the curriculum. When it comes to our LGBTQ students, I think it is really important to have a conversation on a policy side and how we are teaching in our sexual education to make sure that we are talking about same-sex education in our sexual health education courses, and that at the end of the day that we are allowing our parents to still have that right to say, no, I don't want my child to be in that class, and that is their right, and that is okay too. But we should be able to have same-sex education curriculum in our sexual health, along with when it comes to our transgender kids, allowing them to say what their preferred pronouns are and what their preferred name is, so that when a sub comes into the class, they are not re-traumatizing that child and they are using their preferred pronouns and their preferred name.
Thank you very much. I'm going to, with the author's permission, sort of rework a question that I actually like. Back in the day, we had this thing we called, I love Della that you referred to back in the day a while ago about reading, writing, arithmetic, but back in the day we also had this thing called VOTEC. If you remember VOTEC classes or classes, oh, you don't? Oh, well, grew up in Hannibal, Missouri, you'll find VOTEC classes. Things like shop and, you know, going to things like that. I think those are still around, but what I've seen, and this questioner gets to that, we need people like welders, plumbers, finished carpenters, and there's a lot of focus in high school on going to college, going to college, going to college, and that may not be for everyone. How do we address that in our career planning at Columbia Public Schools for those high school students? And Della, I think you're first.
Okay. Everyone do not want to go to college, but that does not mean that you cannot learn. There are skill sets that are very appropriate for all of us. And so how we have to address it is that when you mentioned shop, now I understand, because I wasn't in shop and we didn't have that, but we should have, and we do, we should have specialized classes for welders, for trainers, and we should also let people recognize you do not have to go to college, but you really should have a skill set. And so therefore, we should have a curriculum in our class, whether you're doing interns or not, that if you do not want to go to a 2-year, 4-year college or what have you, you still can graduate with a skill set and make a good living.
Based on what I pay plumbers, I would say that's correct.
Plumbers make a very good living.
Blake Willoughby?
I may be a doctoral student here at the University of Missouri, but I highly believe in what the work that the Career Center is doing and what vocational classes and what skill sets and trade skills offer to our kids. I think increasing those courses is very important because there is multiple sides to life readiness, but there are two main streams to life readiness for our kids in conversations. It's college ready and career ready. And for our students that want to be career ready, we need to make sure that they have the skill sets and the trade skills. That means that when they graduate, they are able to financially support themselves and that they are not floundering and they are not one bill away from being in poverty. One thing that I would like to see happen at our Career Center is bringing a cosmetology program in, because that is one of the fastest growing, one of the largest, easiest spaces, and it's not that it's easy, but we see a lot of people being able to make very good money and also learn entrepreneurship skills, and it allows them to have a trade skill that is necessary everywhere you go. Everyone needs to get their hair cut or done or do. So,
thank you very much. Maybe I need to go see mine soon. Jay Atkins.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything, and I will just say that if I manage to get a seat on this board and Blake does as well, I'll be happy to work with you on going down to Jefferson City and getting rid of all the ridiculous licensure requirements that we have to jump through to be like a barber or an esthetician. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, and that's and it's a barrier to entry for a lot of people that, quite frankly, could flourish in that occupation. So I absolutely agree. I think if I had it to do over again, I'd want to go be an underwater welder. I always thought that sounded fun. Plus, I make a ton of money. But you know that's it. I'm joking a little bit, but the reality is, you know, Blake and Della nailed it. right? I mean, we should be educating our kids. We need to, they need fundamentals. They need the building blocks. They need to know how to, read, write, do math, all those kind of things. Those are hugely important. But then we also need to give those students that don't want to go to college, that want to go into performance arts, or be a builder or a maker, I guess is the term now, or go to the career center and follow a vocational track. We need to support that and offer that as well.
Thank you very much. Our next question will start with Blake, and it's really very non-controversial. What rules would you propose regarding guns in school?
For me, I don't believe having our teachers have guns and that be that easily accessible across the district is a good policy. What I think is a good policy is if we want resource officers or police officers to be on our campuses in our district, making sure that they have the training that means that they are able to deal with a high intensity situation with a child, because that is a very different situation than with an adult. And so making sure that the child is safe if there's something going on and that safety is there. We have some great safety measures already in our school district, so I don't really see that there being a huge clamoring or a need for that. But if the community is wanting to have that conversation about guns and wanting to see it, to me where that conversation is about our resource officers and police officers. I do not think that we should be arming our teachers or our principals.
Thank you very much. Jay Atkins.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to bring my military perspective to this a little bit and go in and disagree a little bit with Blake on this. So the threat is changing to our schools, right? The last 20 years have seen an unbelievable and tragic rise in mass shootings in our schools. That's a very real threat that our teachers and our administrators and as board members, we have to think about every day, and we have to think through ahead of time how we're going to respond to that. We've done a lot of great things with improving safety measures at our schools already. I think that's incredibly important, because the best way to avoid it is to stop it from happening in the first place. But beyond that, I would propose that should we be allowed to under state law, I would propose that we a three-point approach, and that is run, hide, fight. Okay, we need to train our teachers and kids when there's an active shooter incident to get everybody out of the building to a safe place as quickly as possible down pre-planned egress routes. Second, if they can't get out, they need to hide, and they need safe places to do it. They need to know where they're going to go do it and barricade themselves in so that they're all safe. And if both of those two fails, then we need to have the ability to fight back and confront an active shooter threat in our schools. And I think we can do that with special teams of trained volunteer school personnel that have access to firearms in a safe, secure armory location when they need them in the event that they do need to fight back.
Thank you very much. Della, Streaty-Wilhoit.
Yes, Jake, I have to agree with you on this run, hide, fight. I really do. Because if I just use this scenario right here and someone come in this room and we are little children, we should run, hide, and fight. But it's also, I need to tell you that I'm old enough to know that I don't have to take the full 2 minutes. And so therefore, I can tell you that guns and teachers, in my opinion, does not mix. It does not. I do not think that they should be in the school system. I do believe that we are going to train experienced people that need to be trained, and we should also train our children, but absolutely not for me. Teachers need to teach, and guns has no place in the school system with a teacher carrying a gun.
Thank you very much. The last question we're going to do before we get to our closing statements, and we will start on this one with Jay. This one comes from our audience as well. A child's dietary habits can be set as early as the age of 7. With child obesity rates so high, do you think that the school lunch program is meeting children's dietary needs?
Yeah, well, I think some of that is set. There's some national guidelines that we need to follow. We have some autonomy in our school districts, but I will tell you, we've come a long way from when I was a kid, right? And it was like pizza and chicken nuggets every day at lunch in the lunchroom, all right? So we're doing better than that. I mean, my kids have a salad bar in their classroom. That's great. So what's the answer? I don't know. We have to work within a budget, okay? We have to make sure that we're meeting the nutritional needs of a broad spectrum of kids, and we want to make sure that we give kids like reasonable choices. So I will tell you, we go through this. We with our kids, we pack their lunch every day, but we let them choose a buy day where they get to choose lunch at school and buy lunch. So we look at the menu and they figure out what they want and they do that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I think we're doing a pretty good job. We need to educate the kids and the parents, I guess, about how to foster good eating habits, and then keep on keeping on. Keep the pizza and chicken nuggets to a minimum.
You're no fun at all. Just kidding. Della, Streaty-Wilhoit.
Okay, let me just say this. Family, we are obese in America. We are mostly overweight, not just our children. We are. I think I had to lose about 20 pounds, and I tell you, it's hard work. I do believe that it starts at home. I think that we have to encourage our kids that certain food are good for them, and let it carry on over into the school, the system. I do know that the food and the nutrition area, they try very hard to let our children at the school meet the needs that works. However, children do not want to eat that. And so one of the things that I would like to see happen is that even in the classroom, we encourage our kids to eat and let them know about their body, that if you eat this, you can have better eyes. You will not go blind, a little bit later, eat carrots. And so we have to make fun of it. And so it's just not quite our responsibility, just the Columbia Public School, but everyone.
Thank you very much. Blake Willoughby.
It's been a recent change. I ate chicken nuggets and pizzas all the time when I was a kid. I was a chicken nut fiend. So know that it is a great change and a recent change that has happened. I don't know if specifically in this district, but as a kid, I mean, I'm 25, y'all, so it was not that too long ago. I think what both Jay and Della has said is very important, and I agree with them. I do think that our nutrition specialists and our lunchroom staff do a really good job of facilitating our kids' needs. One thing that I think could be something that we could look at resources, but that's really hard just because of budget and stuff. We do have some schools that don't have like full functioning kitchens, so they're just reheating food. And so that is something that I think we could look at in making improvements in those areas. But like I said, I agree with both of the other two candidates, and I do think that constantly looking at what we can do to improve it and teach our kids nutritional information is very important. Another collaboration we could see happen, and that's where this community engagement approach really comes into with me, is engaging with our city and really having collaboration between the district and the city to help inform our families about what are good nutritional practices, because we can teach our kids in the classroom, but we do need to address the family issue as well and just give that information.
Okay, the three of you have survived the speed round, so no more surprises. You're almost finished, but we're going to now go to our closing statements, which are 1 minute. Am I correct, ladies? 1 minute? Okay. So you now have time to do that. We're going to go in reverse ballot order. So Jay Atkins, you may begin.
Thank you. Well, I will close the way I opened by, thanking the library, thanking the league for having us in, and thanking Renee and KFRU for airing this and putting this together. So listen, 8% voter turnout, we can do better than that as a community. So I hope first and foremost you and all your friends and all of their friends get out and vote. And when you do, I would note that I'm the only candidate up here that has kids in the school district right now. We've got 4 of them. It's kind of a direct feedback loop for what's going on in our schools, and we take the operation of our schools very seriously. So with that, I would just say it's been a pleasure to be here. I would ask for your vote on April 2nd, and I hope everybody has a wonderful spring break.
Thank you very much. Mr. Willoughby.
If you follow the philosophy that our teachers who are on the ground in the classroom have the best ideas and the best decision on what's going to be teaching our kids and who's going to make sure that our kids are learning the best that they can, I'm your candidate. The CMEA and the CMSTA, our two largest teacher organizations here in CBS, have endorsed me. Both of them have endorsed me. They are both wanting to see a fresh, young, community-engaged artist educator perspective on the board, because they do think that that is important, and they believe that my message of coming to our community's turf and engaging and constantly being present and talking to our community, talking to our teachers, talking to our parents, and talking to our students is a message and a need and a shift that needs to be on the board now. So vote for Blake Willoughby on April 2nd. Thank you. Thank you,
Blake. Della, Streaty-Wilhoit.
Yes. You know, I think you will like me. I really do. I think you will like the fact that I am an experienced educator. I think you will like the fact that I will communicate with you. And I know that it will take a minute or two to build trust. So I want you to walk in there on April the 2nd and you will see, or Della Streaty-Wilhoit, the very first name. Don't just choose me on April the 2nd because of the first name. Choose me because I want to be a part of the community by helping our children to grow. I know our children, they are our future. And so with that, I want to thank every one of you for listening to me. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to call me or put a note on Facebook. And I must say, God bless every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom, I'm looking to you. Can you take a quick break so we can reset?